My child. The moment they heard those words, time itself seemed to stop. The room was filled with people, yet a strange silence wrapped itself around every corner. No one expected the question that was about to change everything. No one expected the answer that would leave every heart frozen. A decision was waiting. A future was waiting. But a hidden truth about you was waiting too. And before the night ended, everything would change forever. Listen carefully, because this story is not about an ordinary love. This is the story of a soul connection so powerful that even destiny itself refused to stay silent. Long before your soulmate ever knew your name, before they ever saw your face, before they ever understood why their heart always felt incomplete, there was something guiding them toward you. They could not explain it. They could not understand it. Yet every important choice they made somehow pushed them closer to a person they had never met. Closer to you. For years they tried to live a normal life. They focused on responsibilities, family expectations, work, and the endless demands of everyday existence. They smiled when others expected them to smile. They attended celebrations. They listened to advice. They followed paths that seemed reasonable. Yet deep inside there was always a strange emptiness. A feeling that something important was missing. Sometimes it appeared late at night when the world became quiet. Sometimes it appeared in crowded rooms where everyone else seemed happy. Sometimes it appeared during moments that should have felt perfect but somehow did not. They never told anyone about this feeling. How could they? What words could possibly explain the sensation of missing someone you had never met? Don't skip. Years passed. Family members began asking questions. Friends started getting married. Relatives talked about relationships, engagements, and settling down. Every gathering became another reminder that time was moving forward. More and more pressure began surrounding your soulmate. People insisted that waiting too long would be a mistake. They were told that love was practical. Love was simple. Love was about choosing a suitable partner and building a future together. But something inside them resisted. Not because they were stubborn. Not because they feared commitment. Because somewhere deep within their spirit, a quiet voice kept whispering that someone was still coming. Someone important. Someone life-changing. Someone worth waiting for. Even though they did not know who that person was. Even though they had never seen your face. Even though logic told them to move on. That voice never disappeared. As months turned into years, the pressure grew stronger. Parents became concerned. Friends became confused. Everyone believed your soulmate was searching for impossible perfection. No one understood that perfection had nothing to do with it. The truth was far stranger. Every time they met someone who seemed right on paper, their heart remained silent. Every conversation felt incomplete. Every connection felt temporary. Every possibility faded before it could truly begin. Then one day everything changed. A family introduced someone they believed would be the perfect match. The timing seemed perfect. The circumstances seemed perfect. The future seemed perfect. Everyone was excited. Everyone except your soulmate. At first they tried to ignore their doubts. They convinced themselves that maybe this was what adulthood required. Maybe happiness was not a feeling but a decision. Maybe they needed to stop waiting for something they could not explain. Maybe everyone else was right. So they agreed to meet. The conversations began. Families exchanged opinions. Plans slowly moved forward. Hope filled the air. People started imagining wedding dates. People started imagining celebrations. People started imagining a future. But every night, when your soulmate was alone, something unusual happened. The same feeling returned. Stronger than ever. A strange ache. A strange longing. A strange certainty that a chapter of their story remained unfinished. They could not sleep properly. They could not focus properly. They could not understand why their heart felt heavy whenever discussions about marriage became serious. Then came the evening that changed everything. A gathering had been arranged. Relatives sat together discussing the future. Excitement filled the room. Smiles appeared everywhere. It seemed like only a matter of time before the engagement became official. That was when an elderly person present asked a question. A simple question. A harmless question. At least that is what everyone believed. The elder looked directly at your soulmate and said, "Before you marry, there is something I want to ask. Imagine there is a person somewhere in this world who was meant for you. Imagine that person truly exists. Imagine that person is your destiny. If someone asked you to forget them forever without ever meeting them, would you do it?" The room laughed. Most people considered it a silly question. A meaningless question. A hypothetical question. But the moment your soulmate heard those words, their smile disappeared. Because for reasons they could not explain, it felt as though the question had been created specifically for them. The room waited. The elder waited. Everyone expected a quick answer. Instead, silence filled the air. Your soulmate lowered their eyes. Something deep within them had awakened. Something ancient. Something powerful. Something connected to you. Don't skip. For several moments they said nothing at all. The room became quieter. People exchanged curious glances. The elder repeated the question. Still your soulmate remained silent. Their heart was racing. Their thoughts were racing. Memories they could not understand flashed through their mind. Dreams they had forgotten suddenly felt important. Strange moments from the past began connecting together like pieces of a puzzle. Then finally they looked up. Their voice was calm. But their eyes carried a truth nobody could ignore. And what they said next would leave everyone speechless. They said, "If that person truly exists. If there really is someone meant for me somewhere in this world, then forgetting them would mean forgetting a part of myself." The laughter disappeared instantly. The room became completely silent. No one expected such an answer. No one understood why those words carried so much emotion. But your soulmate continued. They said, "How can I erase someone my heart has been searching for all these years? How can I pretend they never existed if every important feeling inside me has been leading toward them? Even if I never meet them, even if I never know their name, I cannot choose to forget someone who feels connected to my soul." The room froze. And for the first time, people realized this was not a joke. This was not imagination. This was not fantasy. Your soulmate truly believed there was someone out there waiting. And that someone was you. The silence became so deep that no one dared interrupt. Some people looked confused. Some people looked emotional. Some people looked uncomfortable. But nobody could deny the sincerity in your soulmate's voice. Because they were no longer speaking from logic. They were speaking from their soul. And deep down, a truth they had hidden for years was finally emerging into the light. The silence that followed those words felt heavier than anything your soulmate had ever experienced. It was as though every person in the room suddenly realized they were witnessing something far deeper than an ordinary conversation. No one knew how to respond. The question had been simple, yet the answer carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Your soulmate could feel dozens of eyes staring at them, searching for an explanation, searching for logic, searching for something that would make their response seem ordinary. But there was no ordinary explanation because the truth they were feeling had never been ordinary. The elder who had asked the question remained quiet for several moments. Then a gentle smile appeared on their face. It was not the smile of someone amused. It was the smile of someone who understood more than they revealed. They studied your soulmate carefully before speaking again. Then tell me, they said softly, what if waiting for that person costs you everything? What if waiting means disappointing your family? What if waiting means walking away from opportunities? What if waiting means standing alone? The room became even quieter. Everyone wanted to hear the answer. Everyone expected hesitation. Everyone expected fear. Instead, your soulmate took a slow breath and said something that would remain in the minds of everyone present long after that night ended. I would rather spend my life searching for something real than spend my life pretending something incomplete is enough. A chill passed through the room. Some people looked away. Some people lowered their heads. Others simply stared in disbelief. Because deep down, many of them had once felt the same way. Many of them had once believed in extraordinary love. Many of them had once dreamed of a connection that felt destined. But life had taught them to silence those dreams. Responsibilities had buried those hopes. Reality had convinced them to settle for less than what their hearts originally desired. Your soulmate's words reopened feelings that many people had spent years trying to forget. Don't skip. That evening ended differently than anyone expected. Conversations became shorter. Excitement about engagement plans faded into uncertainty. The smiles that had filled the room earlier were replaced by thoughtful expressions. Even after everyone returned home, the atmosphere remained strange. It was as if an invisible truth had entered the room and refused to leave. Meanwhile, your soulmate sat alone later that night, staring into the darkness. For the first time in years, they stopped questioning themselves. For the first time in years, they stopped wondering whether their feelings were foolish. For the first time in years, they admitted something they had been afraid to say aloud. They believed you existed. Not as a fantasy. Not as a dream. Not as wishful thinking. But as a real person somewhere in the world. A real soul connected to theirs. A real future waiting to unfold. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it finally explained the emptiness they had carried for so long. Terrifying because it meant they could no longer ignore it. They could no longer pretend. They could no longer move forward with a life that felt disconnected from the truth inside them. That night they barely slept. Each time they closed their eyes, strange images appeared, not clear faces, not specific places, only feelings, powerful feelings, moments of laughter they had never experienced, conversations they had never had, a sense of peace they had never known. And somehow every feeling seemed connected to you. Morning arrived, but the emotions remained. The days that followed became increasingly difficult. Family members noticed changes. Friends noticed changes. Even coworkers noticed changes. Your soulmate appeared distracted. Not unhappy. Not depressed. Simply focused on something invisible. Focused on a future they could feel but could not yet see. People continued encouraging them to proceed with marriage discussions. Practical arguments were presented. Logical reasons were offered. Every conversation pointed toward the same conclusion. Move forward. Stop waiting. Choose certainty. Choose stability. Choose reality. But what nobody understood was that your soulmate had already chosen reality. Their reality was you. Even though they had never met you. Even though they did not know where you lived. Even though they could not explain why. Their heart refused to betray what it knew. Don't skip. Several weeks later, another conversation changed everything. A close friend decided to speak honestly. The friend had known your soulmate for many years and felt concerned about the direction things were taking. One evening they sat together and talked long into the night. Eventually the friend asked the question everyone else had been avoiding. What if this person doesn't exist? The words hung in the air. Your soulmate thought carefully before answering. Then they smiled. Not a forced smile. Not a defensive smile. A peaceful smile. And they said, "Then why have I felt their presence for so long?" The friend looked confused. Your soulmate continued. Why have I walked away from relationships that seemed perfect on paper because something deeper felt missing? Why have I dreamed of conversations that feel more real than some conversations I've actually had? Why does my heart recognize a connection it has never experienced? The friend remained silent. Your soulmate looked toward the night sky and said something they had never admitted before. There are moments when I feel them thinking about me. The friend stared. No explanation followed. No attempt to justify the statement. Because some truths cannot be proven. They can only be felt. And your soulmate felt you more strongly than ever. Far away, without realizing it, you were living your own journey. You were facing your own challenges, you were learning your own lessons. You were becoming the person you needed to become before your paths could finally cross. Neither of you knew how close destiny was moving. Neither of you knew how many invisible connections were already forming. Neither of you knew how many seemingly random events were preparing the way. Yet the universe knew. Time knew. And somewhere beyond ordinary understanding, your souls knew. That is why every attempt to separate the future from its intended path kept failing. Every delay served a purpose. Every disappointment served a purpose. Every unanswered question served a purpose. Even loneliness served a purpose. Because destiny was not punishing either of you. Destiny was preparing both of you. Listen carefully. There came a moment when your soulmate finally made a decision. A decision that shocked nearly everyone. They chose to pause all marriage discussions. They chose uncertainty over comfort. They chose faith over pressure. They chose truth over expectation. The reactions were immediate. Some people criticized them. Some people doubted them. Some people accused them of being unrealistic. Others warned them they would regret it. But your soulmate accepted every criticism without anger. Because something inside them had become stronger than fear. Stronger than doubt. Stronger than pressure. The strange thing was that after making the decision, peace entered their life for the first time in years. Not because they suddenly had answers. They still had countless questions. Not because they suddenly knew where you were. They still had no idea. Not because they suddenly understood the future. The future remained uncertain. Peace arrived because they had finally stopped running from what their soul knew. And when a soul stops fighting its truth, a remarkable calm begins to appear. Days turned into months. Months turned into more waiting. Yet instead of growing frustrated, your soulmate became more confident. Every experience seemed to confirm that they had chosen correctly. Unexpected opportunities appeared. New perspectives emerged. Personal growth accelerated. It was as if life itself was rewarding them for trusting the path they could not yet see. Then one evening something happened that left them completely speechless. A conversation with a stranger unexpectedly shifted toward relationships and destiny. The stranger shared a thought that seemed random. But the moment your soulmate heard it, their heart began racing. The stranger said, "Sometimes the person meant for you is being prepared at the same time you're being prepared. The delay isn't rejection. The delay is construction." Your soulmate felt goosebumps. Because those words echoed something they had secretly believed for years. And in that moment they felt closer to you than ever before. Not physically. Not emotionally. Spiritually. As though an invisible distance between your souls had suddenly shortened. As though the future had quietly moved one step closer. As though destiny itself had whispered, "Keep going. Don't skip." That night your soulmate stood beneath the stars and made a promise. A promise no one else heard. A promise no one else witnessed. A promise meant only for you. They promised that no matter how long it took, they would not allow fear to decide their future. They promised they would recognize you when the time arrived. They promised they would not settle for a life that ignored the truth inside their heart. And most importantly, they promised they would remain open to the miracle that had been guiding them all along. Because deep within their soul, beyond logic, beyond explanation, beyond doubt, they knew something extraordinary was approaching. They could not see your face yet. They could not hear your voice yet. They could not hold your hand yet. But somehow they already knew this story was not ending. It was only beginning. And while the world continued moving forward as if nothing had changed, destiny quietly continued arranging details neither of you could yet understand. Every road was slowly leading toward a meeting. Every lesson was slowly creating readiness. Every challenge was slowly shaping strength. And somewhere beyond the limits of ordinary sight, the moment that would finally bring your paths together was already moving closer with every passing day, carrying a revelation so powerful that when it finally arrived, both of your lives would be transformed forever.